Hey there, it's Tank Earl, and this here is the Sony Xperia Z1s. It is the successor of the Z1 and an exclusive to T-Mobile here in the US. So this is a T-Mobile version, obviously. What you're looking at is a flagship phone for Sony. It just recently got superseded by the Xperia Z2 that was announced at Mobile World Congress, but the Z2 isn't out yet, so this is pretty much what you have if you want the best there is. So anyway, it doesn't look that huge, but it's actually a pretty big phone. The screen here is 5 inches, 1080p by 1920, so pretty high-end in terms of specs. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite hold up to that. I'll show you what I mean. It's a bit of a mixed bag, this screen. But the device itself is really gorgeous. It's a bit on the big side because there's a lot of bezel. But I really love the industrial design. Let me just flip it over real quick so you can get a feel for what it looks like from behind. As you can see, it's a big monolithic slab of glass on front and back with plastic edges. Really quite a gorgeous design. It's very thin, 8 millimeters. Yeah, so basically what I want to do is walk you through some of the specs on this so you kind of have an idea what it's about. So this has a Snapdragon 800 on board, which is pretty much state of the art, unless you count the 801 and 805 that have been announced. It's got 2 gigs of RAM. The first thing you'll notice right away, right, is that this does not have separate buttons. The buttons are, it's using the screens for the buttons. This seems to be the way to go. Very much like Nexus. Sony's been doing this for a while. Other manufacturers are starting to follow suit. In the top here, you'll see there's a 2 megapixel fixed focus front-facing camera. The Sony logo, you can see the earpiece is kind of embedded right here between the edge of the plastic and the glass. And I'm sure there are a bunch of sensors right next to the Sony logo here for face detection and ambient light, etc. So no surprises here really, as again, there's really nothing down here. There's actually a notification LED as well up here that you can't see right now since I don't have any notifications. In the back, obviously, a bunch of logos, T-Mobile here at the bottom. You've got the Xperia logo for Sony, a little NFC logo, because this has obviously NFC like any decent phone would have. And here's that 20 megapixel autofocus high-end Sony camera with the latest Exmor and Bions processing. It's kind of insanity on paper, but not quite convinced it's that awesome. It is good. Again, I'm going to get into more detail about that shortly. Let's walk you around the edges here really quickly. As you can see, there's a standard 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. If you remember, on the Xperia Z, which came before the Z1, there was a flap up here with a headphone jack. That was a bit of a pain in the butt. This is still a waterproof phone, water resistant, I should say, up to 1 meter for 30 minutes, and also dust proof. So it's nice to see that they've gone waterproof, but with the jack exposed like that. Going to the right hand side is where a lot of the action happens. There is a couple, well, there's one flap right here, and a bunch of buttons here. So the flap hides, let me see if I can get it. It hides the SIM card. It's a micro SIM, standard fare here. And then you have the power lock key, which kind of looks like a camera button. This is kind of their design language right now. I wish this was actually the camera button. Well, down here instead. And here you can probably see it, I'm not sure, there's the volume rocker. And then on the bottom here is the actual camera key, dual to 10 camera key. Now I want to commend Sony for being one of the few Android manufacturers to include a double to 10 camera button on what they consider to be a serious camera phone. That's the way it should be. Every Android device made should have this functionality. Most Windows phones have it. I know that it's no longer a requirement for the next version of the OS, but still. Here's the bottom edge. You can see there's a little hole for a lanyard and the speaker grill for the main speaker, not the earpiece. On the left hand side, you really don't have too much other than this interesting looking dock port, which is probably for some sort of proprietary magnetic charging dock. I think it's magnetic. It looks like a magnetic connector would look. And there are 2 kind of hidden flaps here. Let me see if I can open them up for you. On top is micro USB. So yes, you have to open this strap up every time you want to charge the phone. There's no wireless charging on this device. And then here below is micro SD. And that's a good addition, right? Micro SD is awesome. This phone comes with 32 gigs of built-in storage. So that's kind of the lay of the land. The camera with the LED flash back here is the pièce de résistance on the back. Big slab of glass. You can see lots of fingerprints despite me cleaning this and handling it carefully. It comes with pre-installed screen protectors like most Sony phones. I had to remove them because they're starting to scratch up a bit, and I'm pretty sure this is some kind of Gorilla Glass, so it'll actually last pretty well if you're somewhat cautious like me and don't put your phone in pockets with coins and keys, etc. This has a 3000 milliamp hour battery. It's pretty good, but not impressive like, you know, Nokia Lumia 1520 battery life. I've gone through all the kind of little details that really make this stand out. I think the camera key is a really nice touch, but let's talk about the display for a bit. Do you see how it washes out? It's really quite terrible. The blacks aren't very black. The colors are okay, but the viewing angles are really the big problem. And just to be clear, the Z2 that we saw at Mobile World Congress really seems to fix that. All right, so the software, as you can see, it's very mildly customized. It's Android. It's not remotely as bad as some of the other skins out there, like TouchWiz. It's pretty mild. It doesn't seem to slow down the phone too much. It's not bad at all. But of course, it's not pure plain Android, and in that sense, not as good in my opinion. The camera, well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Tons of detail, really pretty much awesome experience overall, but the problem that I find is that it just doesn't have the same low light performance as I'd expect from a phone today. Lots of noise. The noise reduction does a good job, but when you see live in the viewfinder, it's pretty abysmal. There is a superior auto mode, which I'm in here by default. You tap on here, you can see the different modes. Manual though, however, gets you to a full 20 megapixel 4x3. The video stabilization is digital, and it's not too bad for digital stabilization. But again, no optical image stabilization, no OIS, so at low light you suffer from noise, and on top of that you suffer from stability, right? So I don't know, I'm mixed on this. It's a good camera, but if it had OIS, and I don't think I need 20 megapixels, unless Sony did what Nokia's done with the 1520 and the Icon, which is let us, you know, do pure view 5 megapixel shots, and let us zoom in and do some clever pixel resampling to make things look better. So before I end this quickly, some comparisons. Here again is the Nexus 5 that I used as a model earlier. It is, as you can see, the same size display, 5 inches, the same resolution, 1080p, but much less bezel, much smaller phone really in the end. Look at the difference in display quality. IPS versus TFT. You can't really see it very much now, but if I start angling these, you know, it's a no-brainer. Look at the difference, right? Like the Sony just goes away here, and the Nexus 5 stays perfectly happy. Also, look at the difference in pop, blackness. I mean, it's hard to tell probably here on the video, 720p video, but to me it's night and day, and that's a big deal. So if I flip them over, that's what they look like. That's where you really see how much more compact the Nexus 5 is. Thickness, well, you know, the Xperia wins, but not by much, as you can see here. It's a thin phone, there's no doubt about it. Now, just to give you a feel for how big this actually is, you know, it's like pretty big of a phone, because here is a Galaxy Note 3 for T-Mobile. And as you can see, that's got a much bigger screen, right? So look at that. Look at that. There's so little bezel on the Note 3 that it's just barely bigger than this 5-inch Xperia Z1. And again, this is a T-Mobile Note 3 with LTE, same, you know, of course it's got TouchWiz and all that madness, but, you know, these are two phones that are flagships on this carrier. So consider that, and look at the AMOLED, the Super AMOLED Plus 1080p display. Again, viewing angles, you know, no-brainer here. None of this weird graying happening at the bottom of the screen here. Flipping them over, okay, one is white, one is black, so it's kind of hard to compare here. The Note does still seem a bit bigger. And then if I stack them together, this is what happens. Again, thickness, the note's going to be thicker, especially with that camera pod sticking out a little bit. Now finally, before I wrap this up, I've got an old Sony Xperia T here. Not that old, about 1.5 years old. And this was a flagship for a brief time before the Z. So here it is. As you can see, you can almost see that the display is possibly better, even though the viewing angles on the T were an issue already back then. Also on-screen buttons, but this obviously is running a Snapdragon S4 dual-core, quite a bit older. Not nearly as powerful as the 800, obviously, but much, as you see, much bigger phone. Of course, the screen on the T is 720p and is a smaller screen. Here's what they look like in the back. Very different design language. I think I really like what Sony's doing here with this. Much, much better. And of course, thickness is a no-brainer. And it's kind of thicker, but you'd expect that after 1.5 years of time difference. So there you have it, the Sony Xperia Z1s for T-Mobile. I think it's one of my favorite phones, but it's just short a little bit in terms of camera performance and particularly display performance. I can't wait to get the Z2 now with the newer display, and hopefully they've improved the camera software. And you know, it doesn't have OIS still, but that is, I really hope to see Sony do that something about that soon. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and of course, check out my blog, Tankrel Mobile, tnkgrl.com. I'm tnkgrl on Twitter as well. All right, I'll catch you on the next video. Cheers!